to the second in our series of Future Strong. It's wonderful to be broadcasting for our second week. Delighted to have our first guest with us this week, Roxanne Hori. Hi, Roxanne. We'll let you introduce yourself in a second.
Hi.
For those of you that didn't see Future Strong last week, Lindsey Pollak and I are, we've launched this series. We're talking about all things early talent acquisition and development related, and we're taking views from a wide selection, I'll say, of celebrities in the field, of which Roxanne is one. My name is Nicky Garcea, for those of you who haven't met me, and I'm the co-founder of Cappfinity and also an IO psychologist by background. So every now and again, the psychologist comes out in me, but hopefully not too much. Friday afternoon here in the UK, so we'll see what happens. Lindsey, over to you for those of you who don't know you.
Thanks, Nikki. I'm going to take advantage of some free psychoanalysis during this call.
Anytime.
Sure. Thank you. I'm Lindsey Pollak. I'm the author of 4 books. The newest is coming out in March, Recalculating, Navigate Your Career Through the Changing World of Work. I am a proud brand ambassador for Cappfinity's new V platform, which we'll talk about a little bit today. I also wanted to wish a very happy Hanukkah to those who are celebrating. I am stuffed to the gills with latkes from a little celebration last night. And I am so delighted to introduce the legendary Roxanne Hori as our first guest. Roxanne, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Thanks so much, Lindsey and Nikki. Hi, everyone. I'm Roxanne Hori, and I am currently the owner of my own company called Next Stack Partners, which focuses on consulting to organizations as well as coaching, both leadership, executive, and career coaching. Prior to this, I have spent a lot of years, we're not going to tell how many, but a lot, in higher ed, and where I led the Career Center and Corporate Relations at the Kellogg School, and then led the Career Center, Corporate Relations and Leadership Development at NYU Stern, until I decided to make my own life transition and go out on my own, being inspired by many people that I've worked with through the years.
It's brilliant, Roxanne, and we've got some juicy questions for you, which we're looking forward to getting your views on. Lindsey, I thought it'd be nice to have a roundup of the week. So we have had quite the week speaking to people globally. Any highlights for you?
I heard William Shakespeare got vaccinated in the United Kingdom, so that is an exciting move in the COVID chronicles. I'm very glad to hear that. I think the vaccine news has really shifted the workplace conversation towards, do we go back? When do we go back? How do we go back? Can companies require people to get vaccinated? So I think there's going to be a little bit of a shift from how do we work well remotely to what is happening next. And I've kind of seen that in the dialogue. Nikki, you and I were honored to present at URX, the big recruiting conference. And we spoke to many recruiters from technology, primarily in the Silicon Valley area, talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, how companies are planning to meet and exceed their goals. I was kind of relieved to hear that applications are steady from college students. At the beginning of the pandemic, they were down and they seem to have leveled a bit. But a lot of concern for the mental health of students as we head into the winter, as a lot of campuses are not active. A lot of questions, and Roxanne, we'll put this to you later, about how do you engage students remotely? How do you avoid Zoom fatigue? How do you support them when this is really incredibly tough? And I think just the last point I'll make is I'm just always constantly with NACE, with URX, with every conversation I have with recruiters, for the empathy that they have for young people today and what a tough position it is for them to be in going through this at such a pivotal stage in their lives. So those are some of my highlights, Nikki. How about you?
Great. Can't really top what you've said, but I agree. I think like the news out of the UK with vaccination starting, especially with that very adorable older lady, wherever she was.
The most famous grandmother on earth.
I know, taking it like a trooper. But what I found after that popped on the news here is, I don't want to say a hopefulness, but sort of a little bit of a shift in people thinking more positively, like there's light at the end of the tunnel, and thinking about, gee, what's the first trip we can take, as a group of friends? thinking about what recruiting might actually look like for students once, next in the fall when school starts, and not thinking, oh my God, we're going to have to start online again. And it might be that it's virtual or a hybrid again, but there seemed to be a wee bit more glimmer of light and hopefulness on the part of the people that I'd been interacting with all week, both on the corporate side, school side, and just experienced working professionals and all, which was nice. As you know, and I'm based in Chicago, and Chicago winters tend to be very gray, and today is no different for us. And so, I think you're looking for those glimmers of hope someplace, and I feel like, we're starting to get there, which is nice. So, I've got my fingers crossed that next year at this time, we'll actually be able to see family at the holidays.
Absolutely.
I have to say this because you brought up colors and gray, and I don't know if you saw the other news this week. Pantone released their colors of the year for 2021, and it was two, which is very rare for them. And Roxanne, do you want to share what they were?
Well, it was I cannot remember the exact name, but it was this beautiful yellow that I actually want to get to paint one of the bedrooms in my house with, because we have one that's yellow now, but I like this year's yellow, whatever they called it. And I know it was two colors, but I can't remember the other one, Lindsay. What was it?
It was gray.
Gray.
And what they said was it was the combination of gray and yellow, very similar yellow to the word strong in our Future Strong logo. Yeah. It was gray and yellow, and the interpretation was light at the end of the tunnel, that there's going to be gray, but there is yellow. And I thought, and it was like it wasn't a depressing gray. I think it was like normal gray or average gray or something, that it was sort of resilience and grit and sort of foundation with the light of the yellow. And I feel like you've just captured that so nicely.
Yeah, it just, I thought it was interesting. And I had forgotten that this was the time of year that they would normally kind of announce that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. I love that. And that just seeing that yellow visually on my computer screen was like this wonderful pop of color, and it kind of perked me up a little bit for the moment. It didn't last long,
agree.
But
let's see if we can continue.
Take what we can get. I love it.
Right.
We should, talking of light at the end of the tunnel, maybe just mention your train, because that was a big feature, Lindsay, from last week. And I think people maybe are dialing in just to see if they see it again.
Our co-host, the mystery of the train is I have no idea when it's going to show up. If I hear the bells starting to come, I will let you know. So yeah, hopefully the train will make an appearance. You get to see it right through that.
We'll look out for it. I'll be noting it.
Thank you for welcoming the train. Nikki,
we'll take the names. Roxanne, we wanted to first of all just ask you to reflect on really some of the things that the leaders and the individuals that you've been working with have been requesting views on this year. What have you seen some of the trends that have been coming your way?
That's a really great question, Nikki. I think, there are a couple of themes that I have seen in the last 6 months in particular. I think one of them is well-being for employees, for oneself, for the students, for, basically people in everybody's circle, bubble, whatever you want to call it, and like how to manage that, because when the pandemic first started, nobody thought we would be at the end of the year and in a more dire place than we were at the beginning.
Yeah.
I think the other thing more recently, the number of people who are, and this is pretty standard, but with a twist, who are looking to thinking about what their next job is going to be next year. And I will tell you that I've been surprised at the number of people I've spoken with who've made job changes without ever going into an office, without ever meeting somebody in person in the flesh, and gotten great new roles. In the amount of hiring, in spite of the fact that the economy in the U.S. is soft, the amount of hiring that continues to go on and all. And so that, I think the twist on that is that at least recently, I have had more people who really want to be more thoughtful about what that next move is going to be, thinking more deeply about what they like, what they don't like, thinking about what they need to be leveraging. And this sort of plays well into Strengths Profile and the work that we all have done with that instrument. And so that's been a bit of a shift from what I've seen in the past, is more introspection. And I do think that's driven by the kind of isolation that we're all living in. And so I think people are sort of driven to thinking there aren't just many distractions. So we have more time, more quiet time to still our minds and to really think about those things, which I think in the long run will be very good. And I think people will make better decisions for themselves.
So Roxanne, when people come to you with that perspective or that's their plan, what are your recommendations to them? You know, from a big picture view, if someone is watching this who is feeling that way, you know, what are people needing and what are you advising them to actually do tangibly when they have that desire?
Yeah, I think, there are a couple things, Lindsay. If the most basic thing I do is I tell them, just take a moment and reflect on the roles you've had. And if you're like a fresh grad, which I haven't talked to anybody who's just a fresh grad, but even I would say this to a senior in college right now, like think about the things that you've done, volunteer-wise even. Like what have you really loved doing? What are the tasks at hand that you really have enjoyed doing? What are the things that you're good at that you hope you never have to do again? So in strengths profile language, that would be learned behaviors. And then what are the things that you really hope you don't have to do? Like you can do it, but they're just not, you're not really that great at it. And so these could be real career derailers for you. And it's a very simple exercise. There are other folks where I will have them take the strengths profile assessment because I think like that gives the person so much good information, and it actually helps people further down the pipe with talking points on how they want to position themselves in the job search process, in the marketplace, even if they're looking to make a move within the company. It gives them more language than what they had before, which I think is really important. And then I think it's just talking with people. I have found that because we've been all holed away, that people have welcomed a chance to have not a long conversation, but like a 15 to 30 minute conversation with a total stranger like me, where I have a curiosity about something, because it takes them away from work and it takes them away from having to think about the next problem. It's kind of like a coffee break is the way I position it. So I've been encouraging people to do that also, because we're not coming out of this real soon, and you have to get comfortable with networking this way. And when you position it in a way that you welcome those coffee breaks, I think other people do too. And I've been really pleased with how many people have been responsive to some of the cold calls that I've made when I've done outreach. Not everybody's willing to do it, but a number of people have been very, very willing to have this call with me, and they don't know me from a hole in the wall. I haven't been referred to them. Oftentimes it's somebody whose name I've just read in an article or in a posting on LinkedIn or someplace else, and they've said something interesting that was a hook for me that I thought could lead to an interesting conversation that would give me more information on something that I was working on. And so not being afraid to kind of ping somebody using LinkedIn or some other tool to get in touch with them, but really doing that reflection stuff, I think is so, so important. And this is, hopefully we will never have another time like this. So taking advantage of this opportunity that we have to do that sort of thing, I think is really, really important right now.
We, just to chip in, Roxanne, we this week took a group of students through Strengths Profile, and one of the big pieces of feedback they were giving us was that the understanding what their strengths were had helped them to prepare for interviews, because they suddenly had a way of verbalizing things that they actually made them feel strong, that they hadn't recognized, but now they were able to prep for an interview, go into an interview and actually have those words. So I love what you're saying, because I think that combination of the reflection, right, and then if you can connect with the things that actually are going to support you on the job moves, lead to the things you're describing in what you're seeing with people actually then moving to jobs that maybe give them more purpose and are meaningful. But it's fascinating to me that still, we've been using strengths at Cappfinity for 15 years, and it's obviously got a much, much longer history. Sorry, Lindsay, can't get away from the psychology.
No. I want to bust in. No. I want to interrupt and ask you to define strengths and strength profile for people who are not familiar with those words.
So a strength is something that you find energizing, you want to use it a lot, and you're good at it. And Roxanne pointed out learned behaviors. In contrast, those are things that you're good at, but you don't necessarily find energizing. And in a career world, often what we've all done is potentially focus on things that we were good at school, we were credited for by parents and teachers, but no one ever held up the mirror of the kind of the motivation and energy. And when you do that, you often find that there is a raft of strengths available to you that means you can diversify your career and that you can go kind of broader. And that's the piece that Strengths Profile as a tool picks up on, and of which Roxanne has been a great kind of advocate for.
Yeah, I think, one of the other things, and this is very small, but in all my years when I was working with MBA students, probably the question, and I don't know that many people ask this anymore, but if they do, the question that stumped students the most or terrified them the most was the question about your greatest weakness. And, people want to make up stuff. And I'm like, do not make up. You're not going to lie. You're not going to make up anything. Let's talk about that. But what Strengths Profile does, for those of you in the audience who haven't taken it, if you do take it, there is a category called weaknesses, which is different than some other similar types of instruments that are out there. And it gives you language about how to talk about that. And you can talk about what that weakness is, but then talk about what you're using of your strengths to help offset that weakness, so that you're always bringing it around to a positive. And I think that's the thing that, students, the MBA students I've worked with, sort of wrestled with, is they're like, well, I'm not really good at this. And I said, but how do you turn that around so that you're ending on a positive note? And I think Strengths Profile does such a marvelous job of that, because it gives you, again, the language and all these other things that you really are good at that give you energy that you can then pivot to talk about how you leverage XYZ that is a really big strength for you. And it gives you a lot of energy. And when you've done that, it really offsets the weakness, and the weakness sort of disappears because it's no longer a weakness because you're not using that.
I would love to jump in on that. And I hear the train, so we're going to get a train sighting. It will probably have 10 minutes to go.
It's already in the comments window, as is the Pantone. Thank you, Andrew. So if anyone wants to, I mean, I've got to, sort my house out. So yeah, thank you, Andrew, for that.
Yes. And Haley, if you can put a link to Strengths Profile in there as well. Roxanne, I love talking to people about that question, because you're right, it panics job candidates and they lie and say, like, I'm just so punctual,
Right.
That's so irritating to recruiters, right? I'm just a perfectionist. I can't make mistakes. It's tragic. So one of the things I say is, it's also a question about your self-awareness, right? It's not okay to say I have no weaknesses. And, I'm a big fan of Carol Dweck and the growth mindset, to throw a psychologist in there, which is, okay, if you know that you have a weakness, what are you doing about it? And I think the other gift of this pandemic, and I completely agree about the networking opportunities, I think people are much more willing to have a conversation than ever before, which I think is really wonderful. And I hope it lasts. But there's so much free learning out there, whether it's a podcast or a YouTube video or LinkedIn Learning, or, the V platform doesn't just say, here are your strengths. It says, here are some training modules to help you with the areas where maybe you do need help. If my weakness is Excel and that's part of the job, strengths are not going to get me through. I'm going to have to get better at Excel. And so the other question a lot of recruiters are telling me that they are either asking or plan to ask candidates is, how did you use this time? How did you use your furlough? How did you use your, the time you weren't on campus? And I think taking some educational classes or watching videos or reading is a really good answer to that question. I'd love your thoughts on upskilling and training and learning right now.
It's so funny because early on, I talked with people kind of observing how everybody's world had changed. And even mine, even though I was no longer commuting to an office, I was commuting several days a week down into the city to a co-working space. And what happened when we all went into lockdown is that we no longer had the commute. So I said the guardrails on our days were gone. And so everything was bleeding. The moment you woke up, people would wake up, they would hop on email immediately. They would quickly shower, then come back to it, and working late into the night. And that's just not healthy for anybody. And so I think what well, I know what I have encouraged people to do, and what I have also done is I have tried to take advantage of all the free learning that is out there. And I echo what you say, Lindsey, like the podcasts, it's just the number of people who are podcasting, it's actually phenomenal. And the amount of content I've gotten access to just via podcasting has been phenomenal. The time that I have made, and I have kicked myself on this, to attend evening like programs on a whole range of things, from hearing Broadway actors speak, to something that's a little bit more. I did some things last week where I heard Isabel Wilkerson, the author of Cast, which if nobody has read the book, you should read it. It's phenomenal. Give a talk, and many other things. And when I was working in an office, I just wasn't going to make the time for it. And I kicked myself. NACE material, NACE content. Oh, I see the train. NACE content.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but the train
great.
really wants to make its cameo. So there it is. That's for you, James. The train is here. I think we know now it's 10:20 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Roxanne, please continue.
Yeah. But I think, we were too busy, whatever that means, before. And I think, we were busy with other things. If you had a commute, even if you could walk to your office and it was 15 minutes away, there was 30 minutes of the day that was set to that. You created, in the other world, we created a beginning and an end to our workday. In this world, there is no beginning or end. So you really owe it to yourself to find pockets during the day. It doesn't have to be at night, but even during the day, to just say, I'm going to plug into this webinar because I have something to get from this. And if I walk away with one new piece of information, that's really good for me. And it's given me a break from looking at the darn screen in a way that I'm really tired of looking at it. You're still looking at a screen, but for some reason, when it's educational, it's not as taxing, and it doesn't matter if you walk away for a few minutes and you come back and all. So I do think leveraging, there's so much free stuff out there through universities and through a lot of other vendors. So please take advantage of it, because it's just going to, again, once we all go back to an office, you won't do it, because that's just human nature. You're going to find a dinner to go to. I can't wait. Theater to go to. I can't wait for that also. Drinks, all of that stuff, because there will be such pent up demand. So I think it's sort of looking at this time as an opportunity for all of us on so many levels.
Nicky and I interviewed a recruiter this week for a research project that we're doing for Cappfinity. And, we were talking about what comes back and what doesn't, and yes, I agree with you. I think people are going to flock to restaurants, to sporting events, to theater, to the things that we just can't live without. But, one of the questions, I'm someone who used to travel a lot, and is this my chance to cut back on that? And what this recruiter said was, I'm going to travel, but I'm not going to travel as much. I'll travel to do a student event for recruiting, but I'm not going to travel for a meeting. And so I'd love to hear from you, from a really big picture perspective, what do you think are the changes that are not going away, particularly in the field of recruiting and higher ed? What's a forever change?
I think the companies that have really figured out how to do virtual connecting with students well, that's not going to change. There's an efficiency there. They can reach so many more people using technology than they could before. Where they had a select number of core schools, they might still have those core schools, but they can now reach, in particular when it comes to trying to recruit underrepresented populations, they can reach those populations. They can go to the little school in the middle of Texas and get the top 10% to maybe pay attention to them and hire them for offices in the state of Texas. They weren't going to travel to that to that school, but they can do it using technology. And I do think that over time, the technology keeps getting better. And right now it's because there are so many users of it that it has to get better, because even the people who have created it are finding that there are stumbling blocks. And so they're trying to make it better for themselves, let alone everybody else. So I think that smartness in terms of how travel dollars are spent isn't going to change at all. We've found that, Zoom and any other platform is just as good as being there in person, as long as you can find other meaningful opportunities to be together in person. I don't know that everybody's going to want to continue selling, if that's your job, via video conferencing capabilities, because I don't know that is somebody who is very much a high relationship person. It's harder. Lindsey, you're a big relationship person too, and it's just hard. I mean, it's been tough, and I have done it with some people, but I actually have found that it's been a little bit easier on the phone with some people versus using video conferencing technology. And so I think, I do think people will realize that, boy, the phone and Zoom or Google or whatever it is are really meaningful tools that will help. I do think people are going to be more thoughtful about the travel, at least for the first year or two, partly because I don't know that people are going to feel like it really is safe, even if they've been vaccinated. There's going to be some trepidation because it's like I've never not traveled as long. It's been March. The beginning of March was the last time I exited a plane, and I don't even remember the last time in my professional career when it's been this long I haven't been on a plane. And so I'm dying to get back on one in some ways, but in many other ways, it makes me nervous thinking about that. It's kind of like I've never had this experience, but if you've been really ill and had to be hospitalized, and then you're trying to kind of come back into society, you're probably going to take your time in easing back in because you just want to be careful. You broke your leg and now you're starting to walk on it again. Well, you're not going to run. You're going to really be cautious. And I think that's what's going to happen. I do think people will migrate back to socializing and all of that sort of stuff pretty quickly, because this has been, Nicky, you're the professional on this, but this has been a very unhealthy way for people to live. Even my friends who are major league introverts have had enough of this, which is sort of funny.
Even the introverts want out.
Yeah, they're like, get me out of here.
Those are my favorite memes at the beginning at the very, very beginning of March. The introverts were like, I've been ready for this my whole life. And, even they're done.
Yeah, well, now they're right there with the extroverts. They're right there with the rest of us who really haven't liked it.
I just want to add a point, and then Nicky, I'll toss it to you. But my hope is, and I miss the in-person, but not 100%. And my hope is that we now become more thoughtful about what is in person, what is online, because I think the default was always in person. And now I'm hoping that we say, you know what, actually, this is going to be 10 people from all around the country. Maybe we don't have to put all of them on planes. We can do it virtually, but this event would be great in person. So my hope is that we just have the conversation now instead of just always defaulting to getting on a plane.
Yeah, I think also there'll be more blended stuff, right?
Yeah.
Sort of like how universities have gone to that hybrid model. I could see from a recruiting standpoint for campuses where a company might still come to campus to do an event, but maybe that event is for a much smaller, more targeted population, but they do their big thing as a multi-school event online, and then have breakout rooms for people to go into where they can interact with different representatives. They can then get more employees involved because they don't have to travel to be there. They are taking up less time out of everybody's day with that big event, because if they include, let's say, 3 schools, if it was Yale, Columbia, and NYU, they don't have to it's not 3 different trips or 3 days of kind of going from school to school. It's an hour and a half of people's time online. And they can do it from their office, they can do it from their home, a hotel room, wherever they happen to be. But I do think they will migrate, there'll be some migration back to, and I think it's important for that in-person stuff, because I think students need it. They need to get a feel for the people. And I'm curious, I was talking with somebody about this earlier this week. I'm going to be curious, like in 5 years, to see the kids who will graduate in 2021, who did virtual internships, and then are going to work for those companies. How long did they stay? Was there any impact?
It would be
fascinating. Never being in the company and then realizing that the culture fit really wasn't there because they didn't get a chance to feel it.
Or in contrast, we might have some culture fit that's stronger, partly because the level of detail and thought that some people in 2020 have gone into.
Right.
So it's going to be fascinating, and I think it could go either way.
Yeah.
Roxanne, as we round up, I wonder if you'd give us just maybe 10 seconds on what you think is going to be topical for kind of leaders that you support in this space in 21. What do you think they're going to be focused on?
I think your last comment is a great segue. I think it's going to be culture. And I think culture very broadly. So the diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff is not going away. I think the voices, the leaders in those various movements that are out there are going to continue to be in everybody's face in a really good way. I think that people have been given permission to be vocal within their organizations in a really positive way, which excites me to no end. So I'm glad about that. But that's all part of culture, and it's culture building. And organizations are going to have to figure out how to not rebuild, but how to enhance their culture. And with all these people that have been hired, where they've never been in the office, how do you indoctrinate? And I don't mean that in a bad way, but how do you really indoctrinate them to what the culture is? Because they've been working out of their maybe studio apartment for the last 6 to 9 months. So yeah, they've been interacting with people, but I think of my niece's fiance, and he's been working on his own, and he goes, yeah, it works. You know, we're on Slack a lot, and he's like a graphic design guy. And he says, but like, it's not the same as being in the office. He goes, I miss being able to just walk down the hall to ask somebody a question. And, you know, you wind up kibitzing with them, and that just doesn't happen now. So I think there is going to have to be a tremendous focus on rebuilding culture and making that pivot so that it gets back to what it's contemporary again. Because so much has happened since March in the world. And if we were all going into the office, stuff would have evolved very naturally. It's harder because we're all being remote.
Roxanne, thank you for being such a great first guest. I think your point around culture, we need to bring you back in 21. There's a whole session on that. It's absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
Lindsey, do you want to just tell the group what we've got coming up next week? And thank you, Roxanne.
You're welcome.
Yes, Roxanne, thank you so much. Next week, next Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time, 3
o'clock. Yeah,
GMT.
3 o'clock GMT.
We are going to welcome Chelsea Williams, who is a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert and the CEO of College Code. She's going to give us the perspective of what's happening on campus through that diversity lens. So, Roxanne, thank you again. Nicky, why don't you finish us off?
Thank you, Lindsey. Thank you, Roxanne. Thank you for your comments. We've got paint colors. We've got agreement with Roxanne's points. Lindsey and I are always happy to hear more feedback, more guests that you would like us to speak to. So thanks everybody for dialing in, and those of you that are listening back, and hopefully today's series will help you think about how you can be strong in the future.
Great.